Okay, everyone, we're going to get started. We have two wonderful guests actually on a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So today we're going to be talking about navigating the emotional side of downsizing. So on the call, we have two wonderful guests. I'm gonna move my presentation so we can talk and have you introduce them. We've already had a chance to chat and we pretty much know where everyone's on the call today. Most everyone, it looks like, was somewhere in this area here. Sometimes it's family members that are listening for a loved one, and sometimes it's the uh, senior person who's thinking about downsizing. A little bit about who I am and what I do. I'm a real estate broker. This is my 37th year as a real estate broker. I'm involved in a whole bunch of different facets of real estate. I do a lot of writing, a lot of speaking, and predominantly focus on home sellers. And then some of my team, who may or may not be on the call, is listed on the right side of the screen. But most importantly, I'd like to talk and introduce our guest. Tons of writing. I'm envious, Barry, about the number of books you and Julia have written. I wish I had more time because I think that's awesome that you've done that. Um, and your resumes are here. Barry, why don't you just say, and Julia, a little bit about your background if you could?
Happy to do so, Brett, and really thank you for having us here. So, I'm a clinical psychologist and family therapist. I also have worked for the last 7 years for a national healthcare consulting company called Health Management Associates. And as you mentioned, Julie and I are co-authors, but we also happen to be husband and wife for the past 35 years as of last month. So, I want to mention that very important fact there. Um, both Julie and I were actually writers before we became psychologists, so we started writing
Huh.
psychology books, and so we've written actually four books on the psychology, one aspect of psychology or another, generally focusing on self-care for family caregivers. I also have been writing a column for the AARP website since 2013. We live, by the way, in Swarthmore in Delaware County. Have been here for about 28 years, so we're local, and both of us have had caregiving experience. I in particular took care of my stepfather who had Alzheimer's disease and mother who had vascular dementia, both of which were tough experiences.
It's funny that I share some of the same uh, background in that I'm also dealing with family members that are currently in memory care. So I'm living that kind of journey right now, which is a very interesting journey, I will say.
It's a
Um,
very hard, interesting is one euphemism, but really it's a hard journey.
yeah, very difficult. Those on the call, what I'd like to say is I put a QR code if you'd like, and welcome aboard. I see some more people signing on, so welcome
Yeah.
everyone.
Brett,
Um,
could you give you went over Julia's slide really quick
I
if you could.
apologize. You know what? I apologize. Sometimes
That's
I
okay.
start too early in the morning. So, Julia, please
No
tell us a little
problem.
bit about your background.
Barry covered a lot of it. I'm a clinical psychologist and in practice for over 30 years, increasingly working with family caregivers. And family caregivers are, as we all know, because we've all been, and you currently are, it's a tough, really tough thing to
Boy,
do.
yes.
And one of the toughest things is helping your loved ones, your parents, to downsize. And that's what we're going to talk about.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, it's tough. It's emotionally draining too, I found as well. So those on the call, if you maybe are years away or thinking about selling, I put a QR code. It's a simple thing. If you point your camera at the QR code, it will help you to give a value of your home because that's usually the starting point. People want to know, well, heck, what's my house worth? I'm thinking maybe I'm 5 or 10 years away. It gives you an option. The other thing for those on the call, I'm just briefly telling you we have a home concierge service, and that's where we connect people with vendors that are trusted, have been utilized by our clients or me personally or my team members. So As well as we like to add people to the list, we also take people off the list if they're not meeting the needs of our clients, because we will follow up if we send someone to a painter or a handyman, or you will be getting a call for feedback to know how did the person perform. We keep very careful tabs on everybody that's in our list. Again, it's a free service. You're welcome to call us anytime, and we're happy to help. But we're not here to talk about that. Today, we're talking about this question about why is downsizing so difficult, overwhelming? I mean, I've been in this for 37 years, and my client base is all kind of in the same situation. There are a lot of baby boomers, they're aging simultaneously, and what I'm finding is that it's a hard process. It's psychologically it's difficult, and the options, you still need to look at all your different options of, where you can go, and some of these options have waiting lists. So I hope today, the purpose of today is I hope you can talk to people and tell them how important the advanced planning part of it is and why that's critical, because it does take time for this journey. So I'd like to turn the presentation over to Julia and Barry and talk, if you will, a little bit about what this entails, why it's so difficult, and any kind of recommendations you have for our listeners at the end would be very helpful.
Absolutely, Brett. Happy to be here to do that. And we've been through it with our own parents. We know how hard it is, and so the short version, the kind of brief version of this is we're going to talk about loss and we're going to talk about uncertainty. Those are the two main psychological principles. And so I mentioned that Julie and I have been living in Swarthmore in a home here for 28 years. We live in a modern split level, and
Mhm.
the funny thing is that I've been seeing older adults for decades, and in my 40s and 50s, I routinely would say to older adult psychotherapy clients that when you hit 70, you should start thinking about moving out of your multi-story home
Yes.
because that's a point at which sometimes people's physical abilities begin to falter and they're more at risk of falling, and that's the big risk of staying in the multi-story home. But now I'm 67. Julia's younger. But I mean, I'm staring 70, just a few years off, and I can't imagine leaving here in 3 years. Even though I preached moving out at 70 and doing this proactively. And the reason is I think as with all of us, our home, our house is not just a structure. It's not just the four walls and where our bedrooms are. It's a repository of our life. All we raised our kids here, so we have all those memories of the kids. We've been here and grown together all these years. We have a million friends here. This house is our life, and so the idea of leaving it is absolutely daunting. And as you see on the slide here, the idea of downsizing, of moving out of that family home for many years, just triggers a lot of fear. Like what will our life be like in the future? So that's the uncertainty piece, and then grief about we're going to lose the place where we raised our kids. We're going to lose the place where early in our marriage, we were growing together as young people. We're going to lose our sense of identity. I mean, we are Swarthmorians in addition to being psychologists
I
and a lot
love
of other
that.
things. Yeah.
I
But
like that term.
yeah. And this idea that we're going to move to a smaller place, one where we're going to have to get rid of a lot of our possessions, by the way, which our kids don't want, that and no probably nobody else in the world wants. And it's just a very emotionally upsetting proposition. So the uncertainty and the loss are big obstacles to going forward with this. Julia, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's just every item is full of memories. We have started cleaning out at least our basement, and brought the kids home to go through their things, and everyone felt grief. So it's difficult to leave the home, and I think if we eventually sell this house, which we will, our kids will feel grief too. It's just it's a difficult transition. And when my mother died suddenly and my father, who had vascular dementia, was left home alone in his house, it was full of stuff. They had traveled a lot everywhere they went. They brought back tchotchkes and art and so emptying out his home, he couldn't really help us much. It was so hard. He had a lot of grief about it. You know, we moved him to an apartment, but we all had grief, my siblings and I, going through his life and my mother's life like that. So it's a lot of emotion when it comes to moving.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Just to pick up on one of the things Julia said, I mean, we tried to give. Julia's father was a psychiatrist. He had all these big
Huh.
leather-bound books, and they were. I mean, they were really impressive books, and he had a big, very impressive bookcase in his office. And we couldn't find anybody who wanted those books. So moving him out of the house meant literally pulled the dumpster up into the driveway, and we're throwing these what we thought were valuable leather-bound books into the dumpster to wind up in some landfill somewhere.
That was awful. Yeah.
I mean, that was so wrenching emotionally.
Yeah.
So this is all part of the downsizing process.
One of the things that you talk about is, do the kids really want a lot of the things that might be left around? And I get the pleasure of dealing with that on a daily basis. And what we found is that, in terms of like the millennial population, typically they don't like things that are brown wood, right? So if you have the mahogany, the cherries, certain pieces of furniture, there's just the demand for it has just is just not there. So it's challenging in the sense of you collected these things, and some people think, well, it's worth, tons of money, and at the end, unfortunately, a lot of those things are not because kids today like, Pottery Barn and um, you know, various other, stores like that. And, one of the services we offer is we have all different various vendors that help with the downsizing and all those pieces that can be overwhelming. So we have people that have auctions, tag sales, we have donations, we have, depends on what you have. Sometimes it's antiquities and sometimes it's, figuring out what to do. What we want to avoid is having it go to the dumpster, right? So we have certain nonprofits that we can donate things to, which is really makes people feel good that your stuff's getting another, you know, use by somebody of need.
I would imagine that helps people make the transition easier to know that the things that have been valuable to them might be valuable to somebody else someday. And that, I mean, but the idea that everything's going to wind up in the dumpster is appalling. And by the way, we have a lovely mahogany dining room table that I can't imagine our kids are not going to want. What do you, but maybe what you say is true, Brett.
Yeah, sometimes the mahoganies and all that are not the most popular today. Um, like I have a lot of that type of stuff that I got from my parents, and I've already talked to my kids about a lot of it, and I don't think they have the same interest that I do in this stuff. So
Yeah.
could be a problem.
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, it's sad because throwing things in the dumpster, at least this was my experience, it just feels like you're throwing away things that were so important in your life. So I love that you find all these places to distribute things to. That is very reassuring. It really is.
So
Well,
in
it,
your in
yeah.
your in your world, you're dealing with the grief, the anxiety, and that's kind of where you come into the picture, right? Isn't that your secret sauce?
Yeah, we work with families around aging, and so oftentimes it's the adult children that are kind of trying to convince their parent to consider downsizing for their own sake, for safety's sake. And it's generally a long process. And oftentimes the parents will ward off the kids first, saying, thank you, but no thank you. I don't really want to hear this. I don't want to have this conversation with you. You live your own life. But the kids mean well, and the parents know that they mean well, and so we help families have those discussions. And then when older adults decide that they're going to move, We help talk them through, what is it that's valuable about their lives that they want to hold on to that as they go into a smaller place, and what is it what is their life meaning that they want to have some what legacy do they want to leave in the way of material possessions, and how are they going to leave them to their kids or to others? And so it's all wrapped up in that sense of what is the meaning of their lives? What is the meaning of the identity that they've developed for themselves?
And
Is
there
this,
is, I'm sorry,
does
there
this
is,
involve the kids at the same time in this process?
hopefully, it would be ideal if the adult kids and the parents who are moving work together, because the parents who are moving often feel completely overwhelmed. There's a
Yeah.
total loss of control over what happens to my stuff. What will my life be like? Who will I live near? Where will my friends be? Will my kids visit me? There's so many questions sort of up for grabs that there is this paralyzing feeling of loss of control. And so hopefully the adult kids who may also be kind of overwhelmed by this can step up and help those parents, reassure them, plan it out step by step, work with someone like you, or work with you, Brett, and make it happen, in an organized, planful way so that it's not so completely frightening and overwhelming. And a lot of, on this slide, it's a fear of being a burden. A lot of parents who are downsizing feel like they do not want to bother their kids. Their kids are raising
Okay.
raising their own kids. They don't want to be a problem to them. So some of them do not want to include their adult children in this move, which is all the more reason to, I think, use the services you offer because it's so hard to do this alone. It's just, there's too many moving parts and there's so much unknown. And then figuring out where to go to is another huge question for people.
For sure. So I'm working with a psychotherapy client now, a woman who's probably 78, lives in Delaware County, and her husband died about 6 years ago. And she's living alone in, I think, a four-bedroom house, which she doesn't need all these rooms. She has all these rooms that become kind of storage closets
Yeah.
for old clothes that she doesn't wear anymore. And she knows that at some point she has to downsize, but she's collected like boxes and boxes of insurance forms related to her husband's medical care and then his death, and then and she if she can get herself to spend a half hour a day going through these materials and getting rid of stuff, she is she's doing well. Most of the time she avoids it like the plague because it just is too overwhelming for her. And she opens boxes, she finds things that were her husband's, and it brings up the grief of his death again. And so she's struggling with this.
The talk, if you will, about some of the family dynamics, if you will, like how is this, I saw a really great article, by the way. You guys were in the Philadelphia Inquirer. It was a really nice article. And in that article, you covered a lot of the questions and the way to talk to a loved one about broaching the topic. And I found that that was really, really good advice. Talk to me a little bit about what that involves.
Well, you start as far in advance as you can. That is really the key. Even if when you bring it up with your parents, they say, we're not moving, you still periodically bring it up. So it becomes a topic that isn't out of the blue. It's like, and if they push back and they say, why are you doing this? You're intruding. We're happy here. Then as an adult child, you say, well, I know you're happy here and I want you to stay here as long as you can and want to, but I worry about your safety. I worry about planning for your future. I want to help you with that. You try to join forces with them, not force them. That's the key thing.
Yeah, and what we advise adult children to do is to basically, before you even get into the specifics of the conversation, to basically say to your parents, I want you to, I want you to live as well as you can for as long as you can in the way that you prefer. So I'm not here to tell you how to live your life. I'm here to assist you to live your life the way you want. And if the parents say, initially, well, I want to stay in my home, then the next question for the kids is, okay, well, how can we help you do that in a way that's going to be as safe as possible? And maybe that means uh, putting in ramps or grab bars or all the environmental modifications that make a home a little safer. Or it may mean which by the way, once people start that conversation, eventually even the environmental modifications are not going to be enough. But the parent feels that the child is on their side, that the child is not
Got it.
taking over. I mean, most parents, when we talk with older adults, and they say to us, my child is trying to take over my life. I mean, I've heard that many times, and they're angry about it. Or this idea of a kind of parent-child reversal, that the parent is now the child, the child is now the parent, and the child, the adult child gets to make the decisions. I mean, that's completely, it just disgusts people. They don't want to hear that, and so we want to help parents feel that they still are maintaining control over this process. Their adult children are helping them, and adult children are doing many things. They're helping with them planning, helping them think through what they have to get rid of, actually stepping in and going through room by room and helping them, closet by closet, box by box, helping them figure out what they may keep, what they may discard, and what they may give to Goodwill. But that's a process that adult children really need to kind of be actively involved in a hands-on way, and then to help the parents begin thinking through where would be a good place to go. And so some parents were going to want to live near the adult child. Some parents are going to want to live far away from the adult child. Living and they may move south in Florida. They may move to a retirement community. There's lots of different options, but because there are so many options, it just makes it a little bit more confusing to know where to go.
What do you say in the situation where people who are on the call now, um, who, you know, they want to move, but then they, you know, open the door to the house and look at all this stuff, and it just is just overwhelming. How do you advise them to, you know, take a deep breath and get started on the process?
Well, a lot of different pieces to that. You try to help them organize one room at a time, sometimes one desk at a time. If you get started in a small way, it's sort of like once you put your toe in, it gets a little bit easier to proceed. It's putting the toe in that's really hard. They
Okay.
they need emotional support for that. They need you to, like Barry said, sort of go with them through it, help them organize, bring in support if necessary, um, and also figure out what they want to preserve. Are there things that they really don't want to part with? And will they put those things aside to bring with them to the next place? We definitely did that with my dad. He had his favorite artwork, his favorite, I don't know, even like blankets and pillows and furniture. We brought what we could so that when we moved him to an apartment, he could feel like it was a reminder of his home. And it depends where the family members are moving to. If it's a facility like a memory care unit, you can't bring very much, but you
Yeah.
can still bring photos and maybe a blanket and at least a few things that help with that transition. But in terms of going through the home, it's an enormous job. You help people to do a little bit and maybe step back and take a breath. You try to help them feel confident that this will happen, um, and take them to visit new places because as they look at the places where they may want to live, that will help them motivate to downsize, to get rid of things, to think about what would fit into the new place and how that would look. So the whole picture sort of has to happen um, together.
And
Yeah.
when do you think the right timing is to start? Is it an age thing? Is it a health thing? Is it case by case? What do you generally recommend for somebody?
I think that it is very dependent on health and functional status. But I would imagine that by 75, if people have been living in a home for 30, 40 years, they've collected a whole lot of stuff. It's time to start winnowing that stuff down. And that means I mean, for one thing, they probably have a closet full of clothes that they don't wear anymore, maybe because it doesn't fit them anymore. Now's the time to start getting rid of those clothes. Maybe they're still holding on to their kids' reports cards from third grade. I mean,
Yeah.
right? And maybe now is the time to give the kids those report cards. Maybe your grandchildren are in third grade. They'd be very interested to see what their parents' report card looked like. But it's really time. I think certainly by 75, regardless of functional status, to begin making some moves. Um, and then I think it's a matter of really at some point, we're talking about a gradual process, but the process in order for it to be completed, it has to accelerate at some point, and you don't want to wait for some big medical event to cause an emergency, like the parent falls or the parent has a heart attack or the parent has a stroke. You don't want anything like that to happen, which then absolutely catapults this process forward and puts the family in this position where they have to make decisions very quickly with a lot of information about what the living environment is going to be best for this parent. I think at some point in time, you say to your adult children, I need you to come home. We need to spend a weekend cleaning out not just my old stuff, but your old stuff. I mean, this bookcase behind me, by the way, this is all my son's high school and college books behind me. None of these books are mine. And I've said to him, you got to come take your books, right? He's 30-year-old man now, but the books, his high school, his biology, his statistics books are still here. So, but you get to the point where they absolutely have to come and they have to take their stuff and they have to help you, and it becomes more of a family effort, and that really accelerates things going forward.
One
I
of the
think it
things, go ahead. Sorry, Julie, please
That's okay.
continue.
I just wanted to finish up one comment after Barry, which is I think that process, if the family works together and enjoys some old memories together, that it really brings everybody closer. And that
Hmm.
fondness, that love, whatever, makes the whole process easier.
One of the things that I see after doing this for 37 years is that unfortunately, I've seen more reactive situations than proactive. I don't know what you see in your practice. I'm kind of curious. Do you see more of the reactive situations where
Yes.
something happens, someone falls off a ladder, or, they're doing something they shouldn't be, they hurt themselves, or their health suddenly changes, and now it's like scrambling, and it's hard to make decisions, it's hard to figure out where to go, it's hard to figure out what to do. I mean, the stress level of that alone's got to be well accelerated to being proactive.
We definitely see that. That is the most common thing that happens. Somebody has an accident, or I have a case where the mother was living alone and everyone thought she was fine. And they would visit and okay, she was messy, but it turned out she was having increasingly bad dementia and wasn't paying her bills anymore and the dishes were piling up and she wasn't eating right. And it became this sudden crisis because no one realized soon enough to help her earlier. And it is not good because then you're rushing to find a place. Sometimes there aren't beds if it's a nursing home kind of place or even assisted living. You want to get into a particular one. Well, that one doesn't have any room right now. Sometimes there are waiting lists. We've actually told people, and we have done this ourselves with Barry's mother, we got on waiting lists a year early,
Yeah.
Year longer, it was closer to 2 years for my mom.
just so that if something happened, I mean, we were watching her decline. She also had vascular dementia. We were prepared so that if there were a crisis, we would at least be part of the way there to solving it.
And
Yeah,
that's a really good point because I see that a lot with my clients, and that is I've advised them to get on the waiting list. It's a lot of it's refundable. It's just to get a space in line. And I have clients that sometimes they call and they're looking for a specific size home. For example, the two bedroom is a lot harder to get these days than a one bedroom. And when one comes up, maybe they're not ready, they decline, and then they're still on the list so that the next one that comes up, if the timing works, they're ready to go. And I think that's a really, really good point you just made.
yeah, I've seen the same thing. I have two clients now. One's 80, the other is mid 70s. Both of them had husbands who had long-term health problems. One husband died of ALS, another died of cancer. They're both widows now. They are both on waiting lists, one to go into a retirement community, another to go into a specific condominium complex that she wants to go to. But while on the waiting list, they're taking this time now to empty their homes, homes that they've lived in for a long time, because they know that the day will come when they're going to get a phone call and say, "Can you move in next week or can you move in next month?" And so they've got to be ready. And so that they're in some ways they have a little bit more lead time. And that's fortunate rather than having, getting hit with a loss or a medical issue all at once.
I think my average client right now on wait list, those that are actually ready to make the move, but there is no supply availability, I think the average is probably somewhere in the 2 to 3 year range right now. Because if you look at this Delaware Valley, suburban Philadelphia marketplace, there really hasn't been a lot of new construction, for a whole bunch of reasons. It's more expensive, interest rates, zoning, all these various challenges that developers have. So you're not seeing a lot of new supply come online. At the same time, the population's aging at this rapid, rate where we're all becoming, baby boomers kind of simultaneously. So the best advice really is if you can get on a waiting list now, it really might save you some time and aggravation at the tail end of the process.
For sure. We think that's excellent advice. So that's part of being proactive here, thinking in advance rather than reactive. Um, the other thing is we want to put the adult children in a position where they're
Ah,
being proactive as well. That they understand that their parents' home is not going to be the resting place for all their valued possessions, because maybe they're at a place at point in their lives where they're moving around a lot, and or they haven't bought their first home yet, but they have to understand that they have a responsibility to take charge of their own possessions, and that's hard. A lot of adult children, I was, let's say, our adult children don't want to necessarily do that. They feel it's inconvenient for them to take boxes into their apartment somewhere or even to the homes that they've purchased, but also they have emotional reactions to that too. They feel like removing things from the family home is tantamount to losing that family home, which is their childhood home, and they're a little bit resistant to that as well.
I think there's another piece to it too, Barry, which is it's hard to watch your parents age.
it is. Oh God.
It's painful. Like you don't want them to get old and unwell or have dementia or it's just tragic. So not emptying the home and not having those early conversations is a way to avoid facing the reality. And so in our work, our job is to help people face reality, even if it's painful, and then deal with the pain. And helping your aging parents can be very painful. It's painful to watch them decline, but if you don't help them, it's more painful because then something terrible could happen. There could be a fall, there could be a stroke, and then, you could feel as the adult child a little guilty that you did not step in sooner. So our goal overall is to help families have conversations, even difficult conversations about the future, about the reality of the life cycle, about people, declining and how to live their best life anyway. And so hopefully it gets turned around to be a positive experience. You're moving on to a new place. Maybe there'll be new friends to make. Maybe there'll be new opportunities you haven't even thought of. Maybe it'll be less pressure on the adult kids to worry about their parents because they're in a safer place. The parents can provide that for their kids. There are a lot of ways to see this as a positive and not just painful.
I like the sound of that, Julie. I also know that the reality is it's people tend to be avoidant of dealing with difficult things, especially emotionally difficult things, and so as you point out, we have to help people uh, look at the reality of the fact that we all get older and that a house that may have been perfect for 20, 30 years, 40 years no longer fits who that person is anymore or what their future is likely to be.
Right.
That's tough. That's really tough.
I was curious on your more on the practice question, and that is, in these situations, what do you think the percentage of the conversations that you're involved with that involve the children too? Is that more the minority where the kids aren't part of it, or is that the majority of what you're seeing out there?
Well, for me, it's the majority. I don't know about Barry because I don't
Okay.
only see the care receivers because we treat caregivers. That's who we're working with.
Yeah, I mean, I try to, when I'm working with an older adult who's begun to have health problems, I always want to bring the adult children in. I would say it's kind of 50-50. Some older
50.
adults
Okay.
don't want their children involved. They don't want to bother their kids. Um, and they figure that if a psychologist is calling their child and saying, "Hey, would you like to join us for a session sometime?" The child must think, "Oh my God, it's the end of the world. Something terrible is going on,"
Yeah.
right? But it's not. That's not the case. It's as you're pointing out, Brett. It's a matter of helping the family plan together proactively for making a very difficult, emotionally difficult life transition.
And on the topic of the starting the conversations early, I think I'm on my 15th or 16th of these ABCs of senior housing workshops, and almost every single guest that we've had has suggested, starting that conversation as early as possible. Even the people that are talking about the estate planning and tax planning and all that, because there's lots of involving the real estate where the if you're a primary resident, you've been there 2 of the past 5 years, you can exclude from taxes $500,000. So I always try to put those types of information into the conversation so that you look at not just it's kind of like a complete approach of everything, looking at, how can we avoid some taxes? How can we plan early? How can we do this thoughtfully? How can we, um, encourage the kids to be involved? And it's kind of like it kind of does make it a little bit easier, but it's a process. It's a process to go. But I think if you start early in this journey, it helps you immensely.
And we've seen a lot of people relocate, downsize, who once they are adjusted to the change, especially if it's CCRC, they're happy. Oftentimes, the landing is pretty good. It's just getting from the big full house to the condo or the apartment in the facility that is hard. But once they're there, oftentimes everyone's happier, everyone's relieved, parents and children alike.
Talk to you with me a little bit, if you could, about some of the resources, including your new book. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your new book and what's on the. Are there any other books planned that you have coming that are in production?
Uh, in answer to your last question, yes, we have a proposal for yet another book, but
We'll see.
yeah, I will say. So, we have written three books specifically for family caregivers. The first book you have listed there, The Emotional Survival Guide for Caregivers, is one that we wrote, published in 2006. Uh,
Wow.
and th- this, the most recent book, which just published on July 1, is this book right here. It's the AARP Caregiver Answer book. And it's basically how this book differs from the others that we've done is this is nearly 150 questions and answers for caregivers on all aspects of family caregiving because in our experience, clinical experience, our own personal experience as caregivers and dealing with friends and neighbors, there are some common questions that come up for anybody who wants to help a parent or is caring for an aging spouse that we have answered, we've developed answers for over all these years. So this book contains all those answers. And it covers things like family dynamics and self, how do you take care of yourself while you're caring for your parents, but also things like how do you pay for care for them? How do you deal with communicating with doctors and social service professionals because our healthcare system and social service systems are so complicated. And so we really covered the gamut in this book, and it's so far it's doing very well.
We hope it's a roadmap for new caregivers and not even just new caregivers, but anyone who has questions about what they're doing or feels overwhelmed, they can find almost anything in there. That's our hope.
Yeah.
Tell me about your relationship with AARP. How did that come about? And that's really fascinating.
Yeah, so I mean, AARP is this gargantuan organization that has a big national office as well as state affiliates in every state, including Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey. Um, the They reached out to me. I had co-presented about family caregiving years ago with someone who was in senior leadership at AARP, and in about 2012, 2013, AARP decided that many of the folks that were in their organization were baby boomers who were beginning to take care of their parents, and so they decided that one of the areas of focus for the organization was going to be how to support family caregivers. And they developed what they call a caregiver expert panel. And so I was invited as a psychologist to be on that panel. And then, as a member of that panel, I was asked to write, I think, one or two columns for the AARP website. Well, I was a journalist before I became a psychologist, and so I'd love to write, and I think I'd write pretty well. And so that has now turned into a regular column that I write on the AARP website that I've been doing for 12 years now, and have written probably about 100 columns in that time. And they're on all different aspects of family caregiving, the psychology of family caregiving. Other people write about other aspects of family caregiving, but if you went into Google and you put in AARP Barry Jacobs, it would take you to my caregiver expert page, and it has probably the last 20 or so columns that I've written, and many of them are about the family dynamics that we're talking about today. Um, and sometimes what happens is, there's a lot of conflict around downsizing. One child thinks, mom and dad need to move. The other child thinks, mom and dad, why don't you leave mom and dad alone? Don't try to take over their lives. And so one of the things that we've written about is how to deal with that conflict with your adult siblings, for instance, who may not agree with you about what might be best for the parents. So it's not just simply between an adult child and the parents. It's also other family members who have strong opinions. But all of that is contained in the book, the AARP Caregiver Answer book, as well as in the AARP.org caregiving columns.
And what about this? Tell me about the Shrinks on Third podcast. I'm
All
really
right.
fascinated just by the topic, let alone the fact that you're doing a podcast.
Well, it's on hiatus at the moment, but I have done about 6 years of a weekly podcast with a colleague of mine, and it's really on the intersection between psychology and social justice.
Huh.
So, yeah, it's been fun.
So what do you have are there other books in the works right now?
So, the book that we have proposed, and hopefully it would be another book that AARP brands, it would be very specifically about how caregivers who are often extremely stressed can take better care of themselves. And so
Hmm.
we do have a chapter on that topic in the current book, the AARP Caregiver Answer book, but this would be a much more expanded version of it that would, because there are obviously many different ways of caring for oneself. We all have our own favorite ways of having fun and replenishing ourselves, but there's also many barriers to caring for yourself when you are caring for somebody else, and maybe that's not just a part-time job. That's really a full-time job. Maybe they're living in your home, or maybe you're going to their home and taking care of them. So it's really to try to help people manage the logistic problems of caring for themselves, and then specific ways for them to care for themselves so that they can continue doing this for as long as possible.
We have a book that we wrote that isn't on your list here called the
Oh.
AARP Meditations for Caregivers. And it's one-page stories of caregiver experiences in which it's really like, how do you deal with a difficult moment or situation or issue? And then we give a little advice at the bottom of each one. So it's just a book of lots of stories of caregivers.
And as long as we're hyping our books, Brett, we thank you for that.
Sure. Why not?
In 2020, we wrote a book that wasn't specifically about caregiving. It was about how people who are over 50 can maintain their marriages, sustain their marriages, because you may be aware that there's this whole phenomenon of what's called gray divorce, of people divorcing in their 50s and 60s. And so One of the main things we talk about here is all well, we talk about the different stressors on marriage, and one of the main ones we talk about is downsizing, because there's often disagreement between spouses about where we're going to go. Like, what should we downsize? One spouse says yes, the other spouse says no. Then where should we go? I want to be near the kids. I don't want to be near the kids. I want to be in Florida, right? And how those disagreements, how spouses can manage those disagreements and come to some consensus about what the plan should be. So that's in this book.
That gets really complicated when you have blended families too, because maybe one person wants to be with their grandchildren, the other one, it's not really their grandchildren. They're happy to see them, but they don't want to live right near them. So you get all kinds of family dynamics with downsizing around that stuff.
Yeah.
I have one going on right now, which I mean, it could probably be a chapter in your book where we have a married couple and one spouse is ready to move yesterday, and the other is just not and just digging their heels in and wants to stay in the house and age in place and has nothing to do with it. So it's a very complicated situation, but I see more and more of that every day.
Yeah, and for the parent who doesn't want to move, and maybe they have good reason not to move, it's again a question of are they able to loosen their grip on their old lives and accept that this is a time of transition in their lives, and they have to move into this later phase of life, which unfortunately for many folks they don't want to do that because they don't want to get older, but also this idea that they're going to move into a place that maybe this is going to be the last place they'll ever live, and that raises the prospect of death for them, and they don't want to think about that at all. So they get very entrenched in the home that they're in, and so we try to help couples deal with those very real existential issues and issues of identity to move forward as a team rather than have this conflict as you're describing.
The other thing I've noticed is I've been into a lot of situations lately where I have um, clients that I would almost classify them. I'm not sure if it's the correct terminology, but they're more like hoarders, where they've amassed a massive amount of stuff, and you know, the thought of what to do with that, it just shuts them down like right out of the gate, just like some of the houses I couldn't walk through. I mean, it was, I'm talking about, lots of stuff in the house. And I would assume that's a much harder, that's probably a different, case to deal with than some of the other issues we talked about today.
It's seeming more and more common. I keep hearing cases like that. And it's a fire hazard. It's dangerous for the
Yeah.
person walking through the little alley that they've created in their
Yes.
home. So, oftentimes, the person who lives there needs to be taken out and moved before you can do anything with the house
Okay. Yeah.
because it really needs to be often gutted. Sometimes there's roof leaks, like things that couldn't be dealt with because you can't even get through the house. So, I've heard all sorts of horror stories. And unfortunately, the person who is the hoarder, they may never not be a hoarder. So even once they downsize, they may need some monitoring from the family and from the facility to kind of maintain a low level of stuff.
Yeah. So, this issue of hoarding raises another major issue. So hoarding is a psychological disorder, hoarding
Yeah.
disorder. It's not people who just like to have a lot of stuff. It's people who can't let go of anything or holding on to
Right.
everything and bringing more stuff into the house and until the house is really unlivable. That's a psychological or psychiatric disorder. So those folks don't want to move. They don't want to lose anything that they've collected. Folks who have dementia oftentimes lose the capacity to make good judgments, including the judgment about whether they can stay in the house or not. At some point, adult children or other family members have to step in and make decisions on behalf of the person who can no longer make good decisions for themselves because their thinking is no longer clear. It's become clouded by psychiatric issues, cognitive issues, and that uh, the that crossing that threshold, taking over decision making for a parent is one that adult children avoid like the plague. They don't want
Yeah,
to do that. And so in our experience, usually adult children get involved later rather than sooner. They often it's often the emergency that will
the
bring
emergency,
them to the
the
fore.
reactive.
Right,
Yep.
exactly.
The reactive versus the proactive. So I started these workshops a couple of years ago, and that was the whole premise. The whole idea behind this was between being, proactive versus, reactive. And we look in each single case of whatever our expert that we had on, we talk about that as, something to give some very serious consideration to. So you're not in that situation where you're waiting for it, where it's too late, and it just compounds everything for the resident.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
So the next thing, there were some people just that came on the call a little later, and you might have missed in the beginning uh, an opportunity if you were thinking about maybe selling a house or a loved one needs to downsize. It usually starts by what it might be worth. So it's a QR code. It will give you an idea as to value of a home. You're welcome to try it, use it, and it will give you some idea. But the fun part is um, we have a book giveaway today, which is really awesome. And our guests were kind enough uh, to offer three copies of the book. And all you need to do is if you could just type in the chat, you know, I got to move my picture so I can see. Just type the word book. You will win a copy, which was very nice of you guys to. And if for those that can't get the book or don't win, how would somebody find the book? What's the best place for to get the book?
The book is available through the usual book outlets, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, um, bookshop.com, which represents independent booksellers. And it's also available through the AARP website and also the website of the publisher of Guilford Press.
Got it. Okay. Um, so what I'd like to offer everyone on the call, we're going to give everyone a chance. If we have questions, we'll be happy to take them. Um, is to follow us and follow us on social. Let us know. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. You'll hear about our upcoming webinars and workshops. We try to do that every month. I think our month off is December usually, just for travel and for holidays and whatnot. And then those on the call that either came in late and maybe missed some of the information at the beginning, or um, you want to have a loved one, a family member, also have a copy. This will be uploaded to the website. It usually takes us about depending about a week or within, let's say within 2 weeks, there'll be recording available, and you're welcome to request a copy or um, listen to um, listen to it. I wanted to also give the contact information, those on the call that wanted to talk to you guys further. What's the best way, Julia and Barry, to reach you? Is email, is that the best? That's what I put up on the screen. Telephone, do you have a preference or?
Email's fine.
Yeah, I agree.
And what I found was really interesting in the beginning of the call, I think before some of our guests came on, you were saying that some of your sessions happen on a remote basis. Could you just tell us a little bit about that? Because I found that really interesting.
Well, we do telehealth, so we can meet with anyone in most places from across the whole country, actually. And people find it very convenient. I don't know that I would have ever imagined doing this when I started my work, but there are people who are at their child's soccer game on the phone with me or video chatting from a yard or wherever they want to be. So ideally, they're in a room and they're focusing on what we're doing, but it's been an interesting thing to see how that has evolved.
Do you also get involved, like I'm assuming that happens when the kids are in another state or another location. Is that pretty typical because they're in? multiple states, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the video technology allows us to talk with people of the country in the same, telehealth room, and that's, I mean, we've all learned a lot about these kind of technologies since the pandemic, and so we make full use of it. We also, by the way, have a physical office in media in Delaware County.
That you meet people and
Person.
whatnot there
Yeah.
too. Okay, okay.
Correct.
That's awesome. I'm trying to think if anybody has any other questions. I already saw we had three people already who put their information up, so we're going to be sending out three books. So we have, I got to get my list back up. It was one, I wrote it on this page. So we had our first person was Ford Myers. So Ford, you're 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 we get a book. We had Diane Ferguson on a book. She was the second person, and Barb Jeffries. You were number three. So we'll be sending you copies of the book. Want to see if anybody else has any questions? You can use the chat or the Q&A function you have any more questions, we try to keep this, and I'm really excited because we're exactly almost coming up on the hour, which is what we said we would do. And I'm very appreciative for everybody spending their Saturday, realizing that the weather is still really nice out and sunny. That's always good. So thank you. Any other final thoughts from our guests today?
I just want to encourage anyone who is going through this process to try to be positive about it. It is overwhelming. It is really hard. But like I said before, when you land, you feel so much relief. You feel so much better. You know you did the right thing, helping your parents to find a better, safer place to live. And as the parents, I think a lot of times you end up pretty happy where you are. So try to be optimistic about it and take it a little at a time and get help when you need it.
Yeah, I think that's very well said, Julia. Brett, we just want to thank you again for this opportunity. I think you're doing a tremendous service for the community to have these educational sessions because downsizing is very difficult. It's very difficult, but you people like you are helping make this possible.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate it. One of the things I would say is that having gone through the process and helping both my parents and now my in-laws and taking them through point A to point Z, the early planning is the key. Start the process as early as possible. Um, and it's a process. That's all I can say. It's a process. It's not, necessarily an easy process, but if you plan and start early and work with great professionals, it makes the process so much easier. So on that, I'd like to thank everyone who's on the call. There'll be people that'll be listening to it for weeks and months ahead. If you have questions, I want to put our here, let me just put my I'm trying to go back here, just in case you want to reach out to our guests. Here's their contact information. Feel free to reach out. And again, thank everyone for coming today. Have a great rest of the weekend. And again, thank you, Julia. Thank you, Barry. I appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Brett.
Have a great day, everyone. And on that, I think we are going to wrap up.
Okay.
All right. I think we have three people tops here, so they all got books. So
Yeah.
Fine.
that's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad we didn't have less
Yeah.
than three.
It's good. Have a
Um,
good day.
yeah,
You
thank you,
too.
Brett.
Thank you.
Bye.
Appreciate it.
Bye.